Welcome to the You Be the Judge podcast show. My name is Wiri podcasting from the lovely Asian paradise of Vietnam. I've been researching for over 15 years into various subjects and topics that affect us all in some shape or form, primarily alternative real news and exotic real information. The truth can set you free, but first it will piss you off. Today's guest on our show, she is currently studying to be a social worker. She has a background in documentary and short filmmaking, and she's very passionate about politics and social issues. She has created some alternative news and views social media outlet channels. Please welcome to the show, Jade Lynn. Kia ora, Jade Lynn. How are you?
Oh, kia ora whānau. How are we doing?
Good to see you, and good for you to be on the show here. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your journey, and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, so thanks heaps for having me, man. I really appreciate it. So my name's Jade, also known as Wahanui or Big Mouth, and like what he said, I'm studying to be a social worker, but I have a background and a passion for media, for film, and for the truth, I guess, in some ways. And, I started to notice about 10 years ago some weird patterns with governments, with doctors, different things. But I was so young, I didn't really understand what it was. And just more recently, I guess I started to see this pattern in the media where they portrayed something, a narrative that I guess suited an agenda, and I began to see more and more that the mainstream media was serving an agenda and not serving the truth or serving the people. And so I decided to start covering some of these stories that just the mainstream media wouldn't cover, or mainstream media would twist, so they might cover the story, but they would twist it to their own means. And so I decided, that's not good enough. And actually, instead of just complaining about it, I thought that I would do something about it. And so I created Wahanui as an alternative news and views Facebook show and radio show.
So where are your social media outlets at the moment on? What platforms?
Oh, so I do use TikTok, but that's more for comedy and connections. But my main platform is Facebook. And so that's where I do political interviews. That's where I guess release my short films or short documentaries and stuff, and where I put my blogs and kind of up-to-date information from from New Zealand and our kind of geopolitical landscape and what's happening here with COVID and with the governments and with the people and what's going on.
Great, awesome. So what's the current situation like back in New Zealand in regards to the current crisis and the lockdowns?
Yeah, so I find that there's a lot of fear among the general kind of populace when it comes to COVID. They are very afraid of, I guess, the disease. And so the government kind of is using that. Well, the government is actually the one pushing the fear message. So someone told me yesterday that on the news, on TV, 5 times a day comes the COVID messaging, comes the updates about cases and the be vigilant, be safe, make sure that you're wearing, doing this and doing this. And it's kind of just a barrage of fear.
Yeah, it's quite overwhelming too for a lot of people with all this information coming to them, and I think it is. It's kind of putting a lot of people into this fear situation.
It really is. You have people ringing the police on their neighbours, people dobbing other people in for not wearing masks, people abusing other people on the internet, face to face. It really is getting quite intense here. And all because they might disagree about a narrative. People will threaten others. I had someone threaten me physically because I asked a question of another influencer, and she threatened me. I was polite,
Wow.
so So the tension is very high here in New Zealand. It's very high.
Do you think that that's creating a lot of stress with people and psychosocial stresses and all sorts of mental disorders? Do you think that it's creating that? These lockdowns are creating that?
Oh, honestly, lots of, so, I'm studying to be a social worker. Lots of my connections with social workers, with my tutors, they've been in social work for 20, 30, 40 years. They all say that the social and psychological costs of COVID in New Zealand is huge. And that type of fear, that type of stress, like you said, it forces people to not think rationally. It forces them to be quite emotive when it comes to reacting to things. And so then when you show them information, it's quite hard for them to see it clearly or non-biased. They're so afraid. I often get, oh, well, you must want all old people to die.
Yeah.
Or, oh, you must want to kill millions. Why you don't believe COVID is as bad as it is, or oh, I get called a lot of things because I believe in a different narrative.
Exactly.
And they call it straw man tactics.
Yes.
So if you don't know what straw man tactics are, it's where someone will attack you, your view, your point of view, your POV, with an outrageous claim. So you might say COVID is 97% of people recover from COVID. So then someone will come on and say, oh, you must hate all those people who died of COVID. You mustn't care about anyone. You're so selfish. And it's like, hold on. How does me saying that lots of people recover equal that? But that's their tactic. That's their straw man tactic, to try and make you seem crazy, to make you seem like you don't care and that you're selfish.
Yes, I call it robotic compliance. It's when you robotically comply, and it is induced through fear. And a lot of the time, it's fear based on, okay, I've got a job and I need to hold on to that job because I need to make money to feed my family. So, I'll be quiet. I won't say anything, and I will just comply robotically like a robot. And then you start becoming what I say, self-appointed guardians of the status quo. So you actually support the system that's actually coming down on you and making you, the condition you are. And it's a very, very mentally draining. And there's a term for it. It's called cognitive dissonance, which means you are brought up to believe a certain way. But then when new information comes to you from like yourself and others to think differently or to have another narrative, think something else alternatively, it conflicts with your belief. And so you get this thought fighting one another in your mind. It's called cognitive dissonance, which leads then to robotic compliance. And eventually you become a self-appointed guardian of the status quo. And we're seeing that happen a lot now in society.
Yeah, the fact checkers, the self-appointed fact checkers. Who, like, I have trolls, like that's another word we call them. I have trolls on my page, on my platform, on my channel, who they believe wholeheartedly it is their job to make sure that my misinformation is fact checked and that everybody knows and everybody thinks that I'm a liar. This is their sole purpose to coming onto my channel. It's not to, like, one guy even, he just reacted to something I put up. And then he checked it and he was like, oh, sorry, I just reacted. I didn't actually read what you said. And I'm like,
wow.
And I'm like, this is exactly your guys' problem. Like, did you even read the article? Did you actually listen to the interview, or did you just react? And that's what they're doing. They're they're just reacting to this information instead of, okay, let's look at the information. All right, okay, I disagree with this, but actually I can see that, or I disagree with that. There's no rational thinking about information.
Yeah, it's based on reaction. Yeah, it's totally based on reaction, and I've seen that around the place as well. And I think it goes back to what I just explained. People are in fear, and they want to go back to that normal that they're not back to now. And so they're in fear because it's a loss of something. They've lost that normality. And so they're trying to get back to that, and they're trying to, any new information that comes out, they're trying to ostracize or trying to put it off or do away with it. And that's what's happening. And I think it's psychologically draining for a lot of people. It's very psychological what's actually going on now in society. And so there seems to be a massive push now and a win over the masses' perceptions to get them to follow the current design narrative. So you've got Jacinda there stating that the government is the only form of truth, and then you've got this big media push to ostracize and persecute critical thinkers. It seems to be that the mainstream media, I call, are smearing candidates and parties before the election, and I think it's a perception strategy. And they're calling critical thinkers, who are really human beings who are speaking out or who are questioning things, they're calling them conspiracy theorists. So what's your thoughts on that? Yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
So I can definitely see that in the mainstream media, that they do favour the incumbent government. When it comes to coverage, you definitely see Jacinda, and then you hardly ever hear from any of the other parties. And when they do let those parties come into the mainstream space, they are often ridiculed, the footage is edited, and they speak over the top of the person and interrogate the person. Now, we all know if someone is being interrogated, it's very hard to think and it's very hard to respond. So, so when they're interviewing these people, often the person might be stuttering or might be quite nervous, but it's the way in which the journalists, I think, are carrying out the interview. They're not letting the person speak. They're not giving them any credit. Some of them will outright mock them. And I just feel like there's a real disrespect for the person who's speaking, for the story, and for the interviewee. The mainstream media, we're not there to hear what they have to think. We want to hear what the person who they're interviewing has to think. We don't want to hear what John Campbell has to think. We want to know what does the person he's interviewing have to think. We know what John Campbell thinks. We know what Hillary Barry thinks. We get it. We want to hear from the person's mouth, what do they think? And just do your job as a journalist and ask them good questions.
Yes, exactly. I'm seeing that happening in a lot of the interviews now, where the interviewer will sway the interview to sort of fit their flow of or who they support politically as an advantage. So they'll always put them as an advantage and come across to make the other party at a disadvantage, or focus on negative things about that party. And I mean, I saw that recently with the Advance Party and with Billy.
Yeah, that's a classic example. Like Advance New Zealand, or it used to be NZPP, they get slammed in the mainstream media. Okay, they believe some very, I guess people would say, out the gate things, but they still deserve respect as a person and as a human being. And I just don't feel like they're given any respect from the media.
Yeah, it's sort of secondary, and it's the mainstream media are just promoting the narrative. And I mean, we saw earlier this year how the mainstream media got a big, massive bailout. I think it was $50 million. So obviously, who would you support?
Yeah,
you wouldn't not support the hand that feeds you, so to speak.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I always go back to this, that, okay, so you've got the mainstream media and you've got all these other platforms of information like big tech as well. And we know that the human being is like a receptor and a receiver of information. So we receive information, and information comes in and it creates and shapes our perceptions. which then in turn creates our reality we see and behaviors that we
our
see.
behavior.
It shapes our behaviors. So then we look at, okay, then so where is our information coming from? So if it's coming from sources that are controlled, then obviously people's behaviors are going to be responsive to the way in which that information has been controlled towards them.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, recently, last few days, I got a Facebook notification that came out, which basically said that they were going to remove or restrict access to people's content. So anything you could post up could be deleted off there. And to me, I think it's just gagging tactics.
Yeah, so I got that notification too, and a bunch of others. So I posted up about it. A bunch of others got it too. So Facebook did recently lose quite a big lawsuit, but that was over analytics. That wasn't even over something that they put on Facebook. It was actually over their censorship tactics and their selling of information.
Right.
You know, it's funny that, but that brings me to something called a digital constitution. So we don't have one of those for tech companies like Facebook, Instagram. So basically, they're a private company that can operate however they like in the digital space, and nobody can tell. No court of law can order them really to do something or not.
Right.
And they have been shown to be paid and biased towards certain agendas.
Yes, I mean, I saw a interview, not an interview, it actually was a court hearing, a Congress hearing, with Mark Zuckerberg in Congress, and he got questioned about the censorship that he's doing on Facebook, and he actually revealed and told them, yes, we are doing censorship. We are putting only what we want people to see. So he actually spilled the beans and said that they are controlling the way in which people think. And this was in front of Congress, and he got questioned about it. So big tech plays a big part in shaping our perceptions and in turn shaping our behaviors. I want to talk about something else here, and what are the current main issues you are concerned with back in New Zealand at present?
Yeah, so at present, one of the I guess things that I can see happening is quite a, I guess, a grab for power, I would probably call it. So I think it's over 100 laws have been amended in New Zealand during the COVID lockdown. We actually had a lockdown that was unlawful. Well, I would say illegal, but apparently that's not. Yeah, it's unlawful. So our lockdown was unlawful for the first 9 days until they changed the law. So that's what I'm talking about, is they are changing the laws to suit their agenda and to control the populace. So some of the laws they're changing is the Terrorism Suppression Act. You can't even see the changes that they are amending yet. It's so new, it hasn't even been updated on the government website. They're making laws, they've changed laws to the Digital Harm Act. So the Facebook censorship one, that comes under the Digital Harm Act. So again, you can't see all the amendments because they're so new. It hasn't come out yet. The police are rolling out $9 million worth of facial recognition technology.
Yes.
It's now mandatory to wear masks on public transport. You can get a fine from $300 to $1,000, and you can be kicked off the public transport for not wearing it. There's restrictions around gatherings. So get this, you can have 100 at a gathering in an event, but you can only have 10 at a church. So there's a lot of laws. You know, I'm not a lawyer, but we will have someone come on who is a lawyer and has a law degree to speak a bit more about the COVID-19 Health Response Act. So she's been looking into that because it is taking away our liberties. The scope of the act actually can encompass mandatory vaccines. It does encompass police being able to enter your home without a warrant to come in. It encompasses people who test positive to be able to be taken from their home and isolated in a different facility. So that could be your husband, your wife. The police could come and remove them from your home and take you to an isolation facility. What else does it include? Yeah, so she can talk a bit more about that, but that's kind of the basics of it that is worrying New Zealanders, is that that the police can come into your home without a warrant.
Wow. So they're also really pushing, and this was, I watched some of Dr. Bloomfield's talks, and he kept on pushing the COVID Tracer app. He's really pushing for it hard. So now it's kind of like, I'd say majority of people in New Zealand are using the COVID app. Would that be? No,
actually, only about 1 million.
There are shops and places you go into that they require you. Is it mandatory to have the app before you go into a place, or is it optional?
No. So it's mandatory for the business to display the QR code.
Right. And
to have a sign-in. It's not mandatory for people to have the QR code yet, but they are pushing for people to use it. It is mandatory in a lot of places to sign in and leave your details when you go into a shop. That is quite mandatory. But if you want to get around it and you don't want to put your details down, sometimes what I do is I just pretend to do the QR code with my phone. So if you guys want to get around it, just go up with your phone, take a picture, and just walk off. No one is going to check that you're doing it. So if you're worried about being tracked by the government, but you have to be seen to be doing it, just do that. So if I have to do it, that's what I do, because I don't have the QR code. I don't consent to being tracked by the government.
Yes, great. And so this masks thing back in New Zealand, is that like a huge thing that's impacted people, or are they just robotically complying to do it? I mean, here in Vietnam, mask wearing is mainly because there's lots of pollution here and dust. So I guess in Western countries, it's kind of new for mask wearing. So how are people feeling with masks back there in New Zealand?
So there is quite a growing number of people that don't want to wear masks. But I have seen on the news that a lot are complying in the major cities. Also, if you can't social distance, they strongly recommend that you wear a mask. But it's very controversial here because there's another narrative that says that masks don't protect you from corona, and that masks actually make it harder for you to breathe. And so because you're breathing in your own carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide or whatever it's called, that you actually become sicker wearing masks. So there is alternative viewpoints to the mask wearing. Yeah. So it's quite contentious here.
Wow. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was elections. So the elections are coming up, and they've been delayed.
Yeah. So they've been postponed to October. So it's now September. So normally the elections are in September the 17th, but they have been postponed for a month because of corona, because of lockdown in Auckland.
Okay, so can you give us some insight into some of the parties involved with this election run this year, and your thoughts on some of the parties involved?
Yeah, so it's been pretty exciting, this election. Probably the most exciting election since I don't know, Jim Bolger. So we've had the Mana Party, which actually broke away from the Māori Party 2 elections ago. They have rejoined together to form one party and to, I guess, consolidate the Māori vote. So we've got some great candidates in the Māori Party this running. We've then got also a brand new one that's just kind of come out of nowhere and is just shot to popularity here, which it was the New Zealand Public Party. They've now become the Advanced New Zealand Party. And so that one's become very popular because they talk about an alternative narrative, to the mainstream. And then we've got we've had 3 national leaders step down. Two, sorry, and they're on their 3rd. So Simon Bridges was running this election, and he stepped down. He was asked to step down. I think it's because of his involvement with Chinese money.
Right.
So he was recorded by Jamie Lee Ross, who is the co-leader of the Advanced New Zealand Party, who I just spoke about before. He was secretly recorded talking to Jamie Lee Ross when he was the leader of National about accepting money from Chinese businessmen and the Chinese Communist Party. And during that discussion, they talked about how the Chinese businessmen wanted candidate positions in exchange for money.
Wow.
And so this is one recording. Imagine how many others are going on. So I think he stepped down because that is actually going to court.
Oh, really? So it is going to be in court, a court hearing.
It is going to court, yeah. It is going to court. So I think he stood down because of that. Then we had Todd Mueller, and he stood down for health reasons, which, I mean, it's a stressful job, so right. I get it. And now we have Judith Crusher Collins.
Crusher Collins. That's the first time I've heard that name. Crusher.
Yeah, you might remember her. Yeah, she's called Crusher because she wanted to, she had this policy where if boy racers got caught and got pink stickered and they got caught driving, she was going to take their cars and crush them. So that's where her name comes from. So she is now the leader of the National Party. And then we had a Labour Party, the health minister stepped down because he had just the public outrage when so during lockdown level 4, he was caught not once, not twice, but 3 times breaking lockdown. So he was caught and the public outcry became too much. So he resigned. We had 2 national MPs and 1 Labour MP caught up in sex scandals just last month. They were caught with sending videos and pictures to underage girls.
Caught with their pants down.
Yeah.
Virtually.
So they've all gone.
Doesn't it get juicy? It sounds like a soap, a drama soap.
It is. It's hideous. Now we've got the Greens Party leader giving away $11 million to a private school.
Really?
And he's come under heavy fire for that. So he was leveraging his position as the Green leader, saying, I'm not going to sign off on deals, on any of these deals, like all these deals we're waiting, because he's the coalition partner. I'm not going to sign off on any of those deals unless I get this $11 million for the school. And so he got the funding. He's using his position to manipulate the system in order to get funding for his causes, and even holding up 40 different projects were waiting for him to say yes. And he was using it, he was blackmailing them to get this money. So he's come under massive fire.
And is he still there?
He is. It only happened the other day. It got exposed.
Oh, wow. So that's, I guess, still in process.
Yeah.
What other stories are going on with these parties?
So then we've got the New Conservative Party. So they had their leader, I forgot his name, but he got
Leighton
found
Baker?
out. Yes. No. Before him, 2 elections ago, he got caught with his secretary. So he had to step down. And ever since that, people haven't really recovered. But they've got a new team now, Leighton Baker and Elliot Ikelai. And they have some really controversial views on, affirmative action policies. So policies that help minorities and Māori, they want to remove them. They want to remove the Māori role and the Māori seats.
Yes, you mentioned that before.
It's very controversial. They believe that those policies are kind of irrelevant, that we don't need the seats or the role anymore. They believe that Māori have come far enough that Māori don't need special help, that they will be represented in Parliament fairly, without the seats and without the role.
And how does it impact things like the Treaty of Waitangi with Māori?
Yeah, so they believe that the treaty doesn't give special rights or privileges to Māori. They believe that it makes Māori subjects of Britain and therefore subject to British rule or crown law. They don't believe it gives Māori any kind of special status.
So when we go down, there's a whole number of parties. In your eyes, which do you think is the one that's actually moving quite big ground?
Yeah, I can definitely see Advanced New Zealand. They are more popular than the Prime Minister on social media. So, I can definitely see there's a huge support for Advanced New Zealand. I can see the Māori Party is definitely making some great ground. Even the New Conservatives actually are making lots of ground because it does appeal to Pākehā people to remove Māori privilege. It does actually appeal to them. So I'm really seeing quite a movement amongst these alternative parties, and I think we've got some real contenders amongst those alternative parties.
And do you know the reason why the election was delayed? It was supposed to be this month, right?
Yeah, so the reason given for the election to be delayed was because of the lockdown in Auckland. So Auckland had a second lockdown. They've only just finished it, and so people weren't able to campaign properly. So it was decided to delay it.
Do you know the process in the elections? Are they going to go back to booths, or is it going to be, if there's lockdowns, then how will people vote if you can't go to somewhere to do booth voting? Like, would it all be online?
Yeah, so there's a few options that are possible. So you can do mail-in voting. It hasn't yet been put across to do online voting. That hasn't yet come up. But I think that people, if we had a lockdown, that could possibly be their only option. But that does leave a lot of people who don't have access to a computer or digital know-how out of the loop. So, I'm not sure how they're going to do that. They also have this thing called early voting. So the polls actually open up. It's not just one day. It's open for like 2 weeks before election day.
Okay.
So you can actually go and vote earlier then if you want to kind of, get it out of the way. So the ACT Party, they want a no jab, no money. So they want people who refuse the coronavirus vaccine to not receive welfare. And, this is really controversial because up until this time, vaccines have been voluntary. Well, sort of. And so, so in Australia, they now enforce that if your children are not vaccinated, you don't receive the welfare, you don't receive the benefit, and your children cannot go to daycare or school. And so, to move to that kind of position in New Zealand, I think would be very controversial, would be very unpopular. But the new legislation, like I said, does have scope to include mandatory, and that does seem to be the rhetoric or the narrative that the government is saying. We're not safe until there's a vaccine. Oh, we'll wait until there's a vaccine. It just seems to be, again, just we need a vaccine. The vaccine is the savior. Vaccines will help us. Vaccine. So, that's quite a controversial, intense issue at the moment here in New Zealand around mandatory vaccines.
Yeah, it's a big push. And, the governments aren't actually pushing things like natural herbs or remedies or anything like that, or even talking about leveling up our immune systems and keeping healthy that way to prevent any...
Well, they're actually going further than that. They're actually suppressing it. So there's a very popular COVID treatment called HCQ. I don't know how to say it, but most people know what it means. And that was actually restricted in New Zealand the day before lockdown to not be used as a treatment for corona, even though all around the world people are seeing very good results with HCQ.
Yes.
And they based their decision on the WHO. But then it's now been found out that the WHO relied on a study that was now being proven to be false. Why aren't we looking at HCQ in New Zealand? Why aren't we doing our own tests of it? And then you've got ivermectin, which is being used in Australia with great success. It's a really common drug, FDA approved. And again, they're not looking at it. They're not trialing it. They're not testing it. My question is, if this disease is as deadly as you say, why don't you try every
possibility
option?
And not just the vaccine?
Every possibility. Like, why is it vaccines? Why is that the push? And to have a vaccine developed in less than a year, in less than 2 years, is extremely dangerous.
Yes, 4 years is like the normal, isn't it? 4 years is the normal with testing and trials.
10 years is the safe normal.
The safe margin normal, yeah.
Someone is pumping one out in 2 years to a year. What is happening? Why are we just going to rush that through?
Dr. Bill Gates thinks at the end of 2021 he'll have one.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother episode. We'll talk about the vaccine money trail and the vaccine mullahs there, the vaccine corporations another time, because that's a whole nother corridor. But guys, there's an agenda around this. It's to do with money. It's money, there's other things involved, but a lot of it is just money. People are greedy and they don't care about our health. They're not worried about, the side effects. They just want to make money.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that a massive push for the vaccine. Here in Vietnam, there's nothing like what's going on back there in the Western countries. I actually feel quite free here. And yesterday, Vietnam celebrated their independence. So they were colonized by France, but then they kicked France out and said, no, we want to be independent. So we celebrated that yesterday. And I think quite possibly, though, in the future, what will happen in Western countries will probably get through to some of these other countries like here in Southeast Asia and that. And so I do want to talk about some of our upcoming shows and what we can expect to talk about and some of the topics we can expect to talk about. I mean, there's a number of things I know that you're researching and that you, as a journalist, alternative news journalist, you talk about. So can you give us some of those topics, like an overview on some of the topics that we could possibly be talking about?
Yeah, sure. So definitely the elections here in New Zealand and what's happening here, with our country here in Aotearoa. Also Australia, there's a lot happening in Australia. So we're going to be doing an episode on that, because we think it's bad here in New Zealand. It is crazy in Victoria at the moment. I heard a story of a woman being arrested for a Facebook post. So, we definitely want to cover some of those issues. We want to talk about the political and diplomatic links between New Zealand, Australia, and China. So there's definitely some really big links there between China and the whole Asia Pacific region. Yes. Actually, there's quite a few concerns that I have as a New Zealand citizen, that a lot of people have as New Zealand citizens, as Australian citizens, that we have when it comes to China's interference in our politics and China's interference in our countries, into our and it goes into everything: academics, technology, politics, police, lawmaking, even, so that's definitely something I want to talk about. If you
technology, AI.
Yeah, we want to do some talk about technology. What's out there, what's happening. And probably like more some alternatives to the COVID narrative. To the coronaphobia, I like to call it.
Coronaphobia.
We want yeah, well, because people are so afraid.
Yes. Even hearing the word, and I saw a poll where people took this poll, and was, are you more worried about getting cancer, or are you more worried about getting corona? And about 80% said they were more worried about getting corona than they were about getting cancer. I mean, like, wow.
I know, like 97% recovery rate, and you're worried about it. Like, whereas like cancer, you die.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Like a lot of people die from it, or have like long-term issues because of cancer. So yeah, it just goes to show the absurdity of some of the thinking that is behind coronaphobia.
Yeah, it is quite absurd. So yeah, I'll be happy to be a correspondent here in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam,
great.
and
Awesome.
bounce back the information I get here with things happening here that's kind of relative to what's happening back there. And just off the cuff, back here in Vietnam, one of the big issues is China coming into Vietnam waters, creating bases here in Vietnam waters, sinking Vietnam fishing boats, and they're trying to push into the territory of Vietnam. So I'll kind of be a correspondent to update on what's going on here in terms of that.
Great.
Yeah, just to give a bit of
because there's a pattern there. There's a pattern with China and the countries that surround it.
Yes.
It takes them under its wing, under its one China policy.
Yes.
So, there's a pattern there, and like I wouldn't be surprised if that was their corridor or their kaupapa for Vietnam.
Well, that South China Sea is a massive acquisition for someone to get, because it's a trading channel. So a lot of trade boats go there, and so if you can control that area, you can basically control what comes in and out. You can put tariffs up, cut off people. Exactly. So that's what's happening at the moment. That's what's going on here, because Vietnam's kind of right there at the start of that South China Sea area, and so China's
and also
coming
part of that gateway to the Pacific.
Yes,
and all those islands and all of that. Because there's already a lot of tension going on in all of Asia. There's protests everywhere.
Yes,
and so
Hong Kong.
I'm really keen to talk. I'm really keen to talk more about all what's happening in Asia.
Yeah,
because I think it's relevant. I think it's connected to what's happening here.
Yeah, and I've been to all of the countries around here in Southeast Asia. In fact, in Hong Kong, I stay with some of my mates who are part of the protests there, and so they took me on a couple of places around Hong Kong and told me some of the strats that they utilize, which is quite cool to know. But for sure, we can talk more about what's going on here and sort of be a correspondent and do a collaboration. I think would be really great. I'm looking forward to doing more collaborations with Wahanui and You Be the Judge, and sharing our information. So let's look forward to that. So do you have any final comments you want to say?
So thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks for watching. For more alternative news and views, follow me on Facebook, Wahanui. But I just really want to challenge you guys. If you are, I guess, one of these woke people who is seeing these things happening, that I just want to encourage you that you don't have to be afraid, because what ends up happening is evil always loses. The tyrants always fall and the people overcome. So just find like-minded people. Find people who can offer you in your research, in your, because it's hard times. I know it's stressful, and I know that sometimes you even have your own family turn against you. So, there's lots of people out there. You're not alone. There's lots. Hey, what is
exactly
that? How do you do that? You're not alone, okay? There's more people out there than you realize who think the same, who are waking up. And just be patient with those who haven't woken up yet. Try and just keep your love on. Try and just be like, okay, disagree later, because they will try and drag you down into their muck. They will try and they will try and smear you. They'll try and call you crazy. So you just have to stay rational, calm. confident and truthful. You know, you've got to be truthful to what you believe. So if you believe it, just, you know, just hold on to that, like, and don't listen to the haters. Don't listen to those who are trying to pull you down, because what you're realizing is true. It's happening. It's happening. You're not crazy. Be confident in that you're not alone, and that, yeah, you're not crazy. It's okay. But yeah, thanks guys. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you very much there, Jade Lynn, for joining us today on the show and for your contributions to society, and all the best with what you're doing. And
yeah, thank you.
And I always say, have a great life, not just a great day.
I love it. Love it, guys.
Okay.
Later.
All right, people, thank you for joining us on You Be the Judge, another show. Don't forget to join us on our social media platforms, You Be the Judge World on Facebook and You Be the Judge World on YouTube. The truth can set you free, but first it will piss you off.